What I want to do tonight is to kick off our discussion by raising a question that the Quran itself raises. You will remember that in one place in the Quran, a charge which is laid against the Jewish community is that you have claimed proprietorial rights over God. You have said God is our God, as though in some way you own God, as though in some way God is our God but not your God. In some way you have tribalized God. So instead of God being the one and only God, you say, but this is our God, the God of our people, the God of our community, the God of our nation. And this has been a human trend running right the way through human history, to bring God down to our size, to tribalize God, to pretend that we own God in some way. I think it's very important that the Shahada actually is a negative statement. There is no God but God. It doesn't in any way say, but our God, but the God that we worship. I want to suggest that we can tribalize God without even really realizing it. How often do you find people who insist on calling God Allah in such a way that it seems that this Allah is our Muslim God and not somebody else's God, like there are several gods up there, but this is the Muslim one? Because that's the way that people hear it. Lots of people in British society think that the Muslims have a God called Allah. So our language actually totally distorts our faith. It distorts the basic fundamentals that we want to teach. It distorts the principle that we don't own God. God is the one God of all humankind. There again, do we own Prophet Muhammad? Well, no, because the Quran again tells us he is a blessing for all the worlds. Therefore, he is the property of all humankind. He is not the perfect Muslim, he is the perfect human being. Therefore, every human being should be in a relationship with him. So the Prophet also is not the tribal possession of Muslims. Oh, but we all know that, you might say. And we all know that the Quran tells us that you are not to make any distinction between any of the prophets. And we all know that when there are bad things said about Prophet Jesus, for example, it's actually the Muslims who are out there demonstrating and saying, how dare you speak badly? But I wonder, is that the common perception of people in society in our world today? I bet you if we were to stop people on the street, they would say, Muhammad is the Muslim prophet. The Muslims will go wild if you offend Muhammad. We have the cartoons, we have the video, we have all sorts of examples of Muslims around the world going wild because somebody has offended the prophet. So one of the thoughts that I want to put into our conversation this evening is the difference between what we say in our theology and the perception of people out there in the world. Would anybody actually believe what our theology says if they look at the way that we are perceived, the way that we behave? When we write Sirah, when we talk about the life of the Prophet, what are we emphasizing? Are we writing for common humanity? Are we writing for ordinary human beings to draw out his human qualities, which are there for everyone? Actually, often when you read the books of Sirah, it is as though you are drawing out the Prophet as the tribal leader of the Muslim people. Again, how is it perceived? Now, I want to suggest that we need to think about how we communicate about our great spiritual leaders, about God, about the Quran, about Prophet Muhammad, for example, bearing in mind the community in which we live, the people who are seeing and receiving what we say. Because if we truly believe that Islam is Din al-Fitra, that it is the natural way for human beings, it ought to be seen to be the natural way for all human beings, and not a bunch of people called Muslims. And maybe that starts to affect the way we need to talk about it. I spend a lot of my life trying to help non-Muslim people, mainly Christians, understand something about Islam. And people say to me, how do you evaluate your work? Well, I don't evaluate by how many converts I make. I'm not a die, just in case you were wondering. But what I am is a teacher. And so the way that I evaluate my work is to say, if Islam is truly guidance for all humankind, every human being who is listening ought to hear and reverberate and be able to reflect upon what I'm talking about. And if it sounds like that's got nothing to do with me, then I have to ask myself, am I teaching about Islam? Or am I teaching about some cultural practice of a group of Muslims? Or perhaps I'm just teaching badly. That's another possibility. So I want to suggest that we need to think about how ordinary human beings, every human being, is perceiving our great spiritual figures.